Higher Universe Pictures.
Welcome to the Paranormal Phenomena Podcast with Brandon Rhiness and Elizabeth Chamberlain.
I'm Brandon Rhiness.
And I'm Elizabeth Chamberlain.
Welcome to the Paranormal Phenomena Podcast, where we talk about ghosts, aliens, and the unexplained. On today's show, how can you tell the real paranormal experts from the frauds? How real are paranormal TV shows? Who is the woman in red who haunts an Edmonton area hospital?
If you like our podcast, be sure to subscribe. And we'd love it if you could like, share, and comment on our show. Those likes go a long way in helping us reach a wider audience, and we really appreciate that.
So, Elizabeth, how are you doing?
I'm really good. How are you, Brandon?
I'm good. We are recording this 2 days after Christmas. So how was your Christmas?
Honestly, Christmas was a little strange this year due to COVID and world issues and things. But I'm really happy that I was able to, still do it with my family and a little bit over video and stuff. I'm happy for the technology and grateful for that. So how was yours?
It was different. This is the first time in all my years that I have not spent Christmas with my parents.
Mm.
So yeah, me and Cynthia kind of just did stuff together, and it was, all things considered, we made the best of it. Hopefully this is the last time we'll ever have to deal with this, but I guess it's important. And I got the coolest present ever from Cynthia. She bought me, I haven't even counted the ball. I eventually gave up on opening them because there's too many. She got me like several hundred mini bottles of cologne, like all different. So I kind of figured out that if I wear a different, I could wear a different one every single day. There's so many, but I figured they're probably going to last me about 15 years if I wear it every day. So,
wow. So
that's kind of cool that I can just have a different smell every day. And
that is really cool. And I know how much you like to smell good. That's a really good gift for you.
I know. I was blown away. I'm pretty terrible at buying presents for people, so I felt kind of bad that she put all this thought into it, and I was like, here's a gift card, buy yourself something.
That's fair.
So for today's show, this is episode 2. Last time we spoke with Morgan Knudsen, who is a paranormal investigator and performer here in our city of Edmonton. And today we're going to have part 2, the second part of her interview. And it was a great interview. I loved every second of it. It went longer than we were expecting. That's why we're splitting it up into 2 episodes. So today we are going to listen to the second part of it. And here it is.
So, Morgan, what are some things in your line of work that you would say people would find surprising? Like, people would be like, what? What is she doing? That's not in her line of work. What is the most surprising thing that you could think of?
I think coaching, I think has probably been one of the most surprising things. I think when Stephanie and I, when we first developed Entity Seeker, we knew that we were going to have a lot to do with the clients, of course, because, we've never been hobbyists. Going into a case or whatever, you work it until there's no set limit. And, but it really has more to do with the living people than it does the outside paranormal phenomenon. And so much of what I do is sitting down with people and getting them to work through their own emotional crap. And it's, I think, really surprising that, people think, well, are you implying that it's all in their head? No, not at all. But the relationship that they have between what they're experiencing and their own state of consciousness is so direct, and it's so concise. And the universe has this spectacular way of being able to show you exactly where you are and what you're doing on so many levels, that it really does come down to the people. So I think the most surprising thing is that or that people struggle with sometimes is they want you to go in and fix their problem, and you don't have any say in fixing their problem. You can be the compass, you're not the solution. So they got to do the work, and that makes some people really happy, and it makes some people really angry because they want a magic fairy dust and something. I don't know.
Is that what a lot of people assume, is that you're kind of like a Ghostbuster, that you will go in there, spend an hour in the place, get rid of the thing, their problem is solved? Is like, you find you get a lot of that?
Yeah, like I think the TV shows unfortunately have given way to that, where the storyline and the dynamic that's come out of a lot of these narratives is that, you know, you bring somebody in, the person does something, whether it be, you know, a blessing of some sort or something like that, and all of a sudden miraculously everything gets better and there's a happy ending. And what they don't understand, and what they don't really grasp is the concept of why exactly all these blessings, no matter what it is, no matter what culture you're in, why a lot of them work and why a lot of them don't. And what they don't realize is that it's the changing of their own emotional state that is actually creating the change in their environment. So if, you know, a blessing does it for you, that's great, as long as you're now in that new headspace. You know, if painting does it for you, well, now you're in the new headspace. So, you know, what you're creating, what you're experiencing outside of yourself automatically begins to shift and change. And so I think a lot of people are expecting a quick fix. And, you know, some of the more negative cases and whatnot that I end up getting very often stem from unhealed traumas that they have going on. And the entity or whatever they're dealing with, you know, in their home is oftentimes a very direct reflection of whatever that trauma is. So in order to deal with the entity, it's not about the entity. It's just, it's about the person. And until that person heals up that wound, they're still bleeding, and it's going to bleed into everything, whether it be their paranormal experiences, their job, their family, their whatever. And they've got to heal that up. And until they do, nothing's going to change for them. And that's why you see cases where you've got somebody that's moved from house to house to house to house, or they've got a family legacy of these horrible things happening and they think they're cursed.
Yeah.
Where, hold on a minute, you're the one that's the common denominator here. Like, and it's not going to get any better until you start to change something. So it's, as I say, some people are very relieved to hear that they're in control, and other people are really mad. So
what exactly is it that like you do? Like if somebody has verifiable paranormal activity at their place and you show up and they expect you to get rid of the ghost, like what is it that you therefore like actually do in that situation?
It's all person dependent, you know, depending on what it is for them. And usually, I mean, if they've got a situation that they're looking to resolve, it's usually they're obviously not having good paranormal encounters. So for me, I really want, first of all, them to see the fact that the paranormal doesn't have to be a negative thing. You know, on the whole, statistically, 75% of people that have had paranormal experiences, or 75 or 85%, is quite high, feel that their paranormal experience has been absolutely life-changing and joyful. So that can happen. So the first step is to acknowledge the fact that that's a possibility for them. And once they can acknowledge that, it's a matter of figuring out what is the events in your place. What is this entity, this negative entity, trying to impart on you? What is it showing you by being here? Because all it is it's an emotional indicator. And when we can understand that these things are these emotional indicators that make us stop and go, okay, I would not be experiencing you if I was in a good space within myself. If I was in a good space within myself, if everything was cool, I would not be experiencing you. What are you here to tell me? And once people can start to ask themselves that, then it's a matter of, okay, let's heal this up. What can I be doing in order to do that? What does that healing look like? And that's where what I usually am teaching to my social worker psychology students is that, you know, when they go into a house and they're dealing with a client, your version of joy or your version of you know, getting to that healing place, you know, it's not going to look like theirs. So every single client is going to be different depending on what they believe, what their culture is, you know, what their hobbies are, what their passions is, all of those things. So it's different for everyone.
So, you know, I have great respect for, you know, there's knowledgeable, intelligent people like yourself who are experts in the field. And this is just my own opinion, but I get the impression that that there are a lot of what we'll call charlatans. And I'm not going to name any particular people or shows, but there's people that I think take advantage of people. They charge money for things that they probably shouldn't be. Is this something that you run into in the course of your work, and what separates the professionals from the fakes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it has become more and more prevalent, especially in the last year. I actually just finished an article for Haunted Magazine on the people's addictions to things like psychics and stuff like that, because whenever you get a situation, and I mean, we've been in one now for the last year of unknown, very nervous, very frightened of the unknown, whether it be a haunted home or whether it be COVID-19, they start to turn to these various things, and they're willing to pay money for solutions. They're willing to just to be told that they're, everything's going to be okay, or that they have a positive future, or whatever it is. So I think the main focus for me when it comes to anything like psychics or life coaches or anything like that you're working with is, are they empowering you to do what they do? Because ultimately, if you've got people who are, sitting back and taking your money, and they are not empowering you to do what they are doing so that you can do it for yourself, as the old adage of, you teach somebody to fish, you got a problem. Because the thing with psychic abilities or anything like that, these charlatans often they want you to believe that they were chosen, they were special, they have something you don't have. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, when you look at the research, whether it's come out of Yale or Oxford or Edinburgh or any of the, Princeton has a massive parapsychology lab called PAIR. Whenever you look at these research facilities, every single one of them has found that all of us have the ability to tune into something else. We have this ability to do that. And it's not something that people are special or chosen for. It's something that is honed. And I think when it comes down to, whether or not you've got a charlatan on your hands, I think one of the key, just one, but one of the key things to look for is, are they empowering you to do it for yourself? And if they're not empowering you and they're causing you to be reliant, and you become there's like a codependency that's building, you got a big problem.
So if they come to you and say, only I can solve this problem for you, then they're probably not true. Give me $2,000, I'll get rid of the ghost out of your house.
Exactly. And anybody that's basically removing that power and causing you to pay them for some sort of service like that, you got to know something's wrong at that point.
Yeah, I remember when we went on the ghost tour, I think you even said something to the effect of, anyone that charges for that guy is immediately suspect, because it's not something you can charge for.
Yeah, you can't. And it's one thing, for example, to be able to, I make most of my money from workshops and classes and stuff like that people have the option to attend. But when it comes down to scientific research and investigations and things like that, becomes very, very difficult to look at that on a moral level and try to figure out, do you charge, for something that can be so ambiguous. And I think there's just a line there. And again, if you've got somebody who is, claiming that they have some sort of dominance over this non-physical energy, which is still a mystery for the most part to mankind, to people, I think there's arrogance there that I think is unwarranted.
I'm curious about the shows that you've worked on. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience on some shows?
Absolutely. So I'm right now. I just finished filming season 3 of Haunted Hospitals, and I'm also on Paranormal 911. And like Brandon was mentioning early on, I was on a haunting back in about 2006. And I've been on a billion shows in between. It's been wonderful. But Haunted Hospitals and Paranormal 911, they are special to me because there has been a gap in people really acknowledging healthcare workers and first responders and things like that having paranormal experiences. Here you've got some of the most credible people who are walking into situations, like a paramedic, for instance. They're walking into a situation with no other set belief other than, I am here to help this person having a heart attack or something like that. And then they have this incredible encounter. And they're terrified to come out and say anything because the stigma is, you're nuts, you're mentally ill, you're going to lose your job. And so when these people come forward and come to these producers and tell their story, it's really impactful. You know, they've often held on to these for a long time. They haven't told anybody. It's their first time going public at all. So when I get the cases, because they send me a stack load of cases and all the pre-transcript interviews and all sorts of stuff, you know, I'm very careful in how I go through them, and I try to offer the best opinion I can, and the best take on it that I can give them based on the information that I have. Because I believe their stories deserve it, and I think they deserve to be represented as accurately as possible. These people are really courageous.
Wow.
It seems like, I mean, the number of people that come forward about this, these first responders, it must be a small fraction of the people who have these experiences that actually come forward and contact the TV show. And just the fact that they have enough to be now in their third season, there must be a hell of a lot of people having these experiences.
Well, I think you're dead on. And when I was still doing, I had a tour, sort of a classroom. They're more classrooms than they are tours. But this one that I was doing on a limo bus for a little while, and I was taking people to these different locations, and we were talking about parapsychology and whatnot. And I found that so often, half of my bus would be filled with doctors and nurses. There'd be nursing homes and hospitals, all sorts of things. And I had numerous of them come up to me during those 3 hours and tell me, they're like, we came here because we needed a place to talk. We feel safe. We can tell our story here. They just didn't have that. So I think, yeah, there is probably a plethora of people that are out there that, I mean, we've barely scratched the surface, but encouraging people to come forward right now it's hard.
Do you think it's improving over time? I'm sure back, 60s, 70s, before that, it was probably a lot worse. I think people are more accepting now. I mean, maybe we still have a long way to go, but do you find overall it's getting better and people may not lose their job if they came forward with a story like this?
I think so. Yeah, I think people are becoming a little bit more open to the idea. Parapsychology has done a weird, sort of a weird trajectory over the years, because, we started out way back where, people were believing that everything was ghosts, everything was goblins, illnesses were caused by ghosts. We started out back there, and then we ended up, into the era where people became more scientific, and then we started to understand disease, and we understood more of the phenomenon, on a scientific level. And then, we had an influx again, in the Victorian era and things like that, where seances became very popular again and whatnot. And then the Society of Psychical Research was developed in the late 1800s, which was actually there to eliminate the charlatans. They were originally developed to put a stop to people scamming people. And, and then they fell under ridicule and whatnot. And there was a while where, it was all bunk and it was all garbage. And now that science has come to a brand new point, we've come to this point now where we're beginning to understand how this stuff happens. And it's now not a matter of if it happens, it's why is it happening? So I think as now science has finally caught up with, the idea of parapsychology and quantum biology and all of these different things, now that they've come to understand that the brain, for example, might be a receiver, not necessarily the generator of consciousness. Now we've got a new platform to begin to receive stories of nurses and doctors and medical professionals. And I think it's allowing these people to step out and feel like they've got some scientific ground to stand on, rather than, oh my God, I saw a ghost.
Just back to the tour, Cynthia and I, we went on one of the limo bus tours that you were talking about. That's the one we went on. And I remember when we stopped at the that old abandoned hospital near Westmount. I used to work at Westmount Mall, and I always found that building so freaking creepy. I remember do you want to just share a little bit about the kind of the weird stuff, the horrible history and some of the paranormal events that took place there?
Sure. Yeah. And the building that you're referring to is the Charles Campbell Hospital. And it's become a very notorious place in Edmonton because of its very sordid history. And the damn thing sat empty for 20 years. before the current buyers invested into it and started to turn it into condos, which is what's going on with it now. But the building itself, it was built back in 1946, closed in 1996. And the hospital itself was doing very well for many years, but in 1950, it got converted into a tuberculosis hospital. And what was happening was that the First Nations people in places like Vermilion and whatnot, there was apparently an outbreak of tuberculosis, and what they would do is send what they call x-ray tours, which were basically piling a bunch of doctors on a plane, sending them up to the Charles Campbell Hospital or to these little villages and whatnot, picking out the people that they felt had tuberculosis and TB and sending them back to the Campbell. But keep in mind that these individuals, these poor First Nations people, they didn't speak any English. They had no idea what was going on. They'd never experienced anything like a Western hospital like that for the most part. And they had no way of contacting their families. It was a really terrifying thing. And when they came there, it wasn't like you were there for a week and went home. There were people that were there 7, 8, 10, 15 years. You might not ever see your family again. So right away, you've got this really tumultuous, crisis that's going on. And when it got worse was the families who, of course, were waiting to hear back from their loved one and whatnot. Here they are thinking to themselves, well, we haven't heard any updates. What's going on? And they ended up, getting a hold of the city. The health minister was Jean Chrétien at the time, and going, where are our loved ones? What is going on? Like, if they've passed away, we want the bodies back. We want what's going on. And they discovered, once Jean Chrétien had started to investigate, they found that the people were being buried in mass graves, not only on the property of the Campbell, but also in St. Albert, and by near the River Cree Casino in that area, like Enoch and whatnot. And it was just horrid. There were allegations at that point that were coming forward of inhumane treatment and experiments being done on them, horrific stuff. So needless to say, they dug up what they could, sent as many people back as they could identify, and the place has been just a notorious hotbed for a lot of paranormal activity. One of those things being a suspected Wendigo possession that took place there, which one of my family doctors, he's now a surgeon, he ended up being one of the people who sat in on that exorcism. So it was, very, very intriguing place, but just horrific history.
And it's hard to believe. I mean, this is not the 1800s. This is modern history. Like, for people that don't know, Jean Chrétien was Canadian Prime Minister kind of back in the 90s. So I mean, this is, people were alive then. It's like, it's hard to believe that kind of horrible thing took place in anywhere, let alone in our city.
Well, took place, but it's still taking place, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes down to like this specific time period, we have to remember that this was right after World War II. So we had doctors that were coming over from Nazi Germany that were working in Canada at that point. So there was a lot of crossover going on between, medical experiments and things like that. And it was really sickening there, but there was some ties there as well. So.
And I remember you saying too that they're just construction workers and people working in the building were, starting to get freaked out about the stuff happening in there.
Yeah, we had a fellow actually who was on in the classroom at the time, and he refused when we parked at the Campbell. He refused to get off the bus. He was a firefighter, and he had said he'd pulled multiple bodies out of there, and the firefighters had weird experiences because the Campbell has been wrought with various problems over the years as it's a sitting abandoned building. But I had another fellow. I remember this was the first bus tour with that company that I had done, and we were talking about this case, and they had said, why haven't they been able to do any construction work on this building? And at the time, I said, look, there's been reports of stuff happening. I didn't have anything specific for them. And this guy who was sitting at the back of the bus, and he hadn't said almost anything through the entire evening, like to the point where I was wondering if this guy even wanted to be there. Like, he was so quiet. And all of a sudden he said, they can't keep a crew, and because the crew is terrified. And everybody looked at him, and I know I looked at him, and I said, well, do you want to explain this? And everybody at this point is wondering, who the hell is this guy, right? And he's sitting there, and he goes, yeah, they can't keep a crew. And I said, well, do you mind telling us how you know that? And he said, yeah, because I'm the construction foreman. And they keep a crew. And it was really interesting. So it blew everybody's mind, but he was able to give us a fair amount of detail where people were experiencing weird shadows. I know when myself and Stephanie investigated there way back in the day, when it was still being used as a movie set, we had screams, hearing screams where there was nobody in the building at that point. We heard on video camera and audio, we heard the hospital like it was still running. So there was residual energy of, heart monitors and staff in the hallway and carts being pushed up and down the hall, elevators running. There was no power to the elevators, all sorts of things. And so, it was no doubt that these people were experiencing stuff, because I know Stephanie and I did when we were there.
And now they're building condos there. This seems to have a horror movie written all over it.
It's going to be really interesting, actually, to see what goes on with that, because the whole idea as to does residual energy survive after a building's been gutted is always an interesting question, and I've gotten that question quite frequently. Is this going to be a situation where they're going to be still experiencing past noises from the hospital and all of this kind of thing. And I don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see when people start moving in.
Speaking of hospitals, I think you mentioned a time, was it what's the hospital that's on Jasper Ave? What's that one called?
The Edmonton General. Yeah,
Edmonton General. You said that there was some activity there as well over the years. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating place. So it's the oldest hospital in Edmonton. It was built by the society known as the Grey Nuns, the Sisters of Mercy, and they had as the earliest hospital that was constructed. It's now not really a hospital. It's a bit more of a care home now. They've got rental places there where you can rent hospital equipment and stuff like that. So say if you had a hip replacement, whatnot. But the people that are there are very much live-in residents. When I went in there to interview the people who had stayed there, I interviewed a lady who had lived there for 17 years. So it's really almost like a care home / hospice / recovery center now. And which in some ways is a really a big advantage, because you've got people that have stayed there for 17 years and have experienced stuff. But probably the most prevalent story is known as the Lady in Red. And a lot of the doctors have seen her, a lot of the nurses and patients. And what they say is that they see a woman in red wandering the halls, crying for her baby. And a lot of people get really unnerved when they hear about apparitions like this, because they think a person died a horrible death and got stuck there or something like that. And that's just not true. Usually when you get a case like this, it's something called residual energy, which is the repetition of a phenomenon in the space that doesn't have consciousness. It's like a needle on a phonograph, just playing imagery and sounds and things like that. So the story as to how she got there, or how that imagery got there was quite strange. It was apparently, from what I understand, a woman who had lost her baby at the hospital and blamed the hospital, like to the point where she ended up taking the hospital to court. The court turned around and said, no, like there's no fault at the hospital. We're really sorry, but this is not their fault. And she made it a lifelong mission to make their life a living hell. She showed up at the hospital every day with picket signs, with trying to, get people to listen to her. And of course, she was wearing red every time she would do that. So anyway, she kept getting thrown out. Security kept saying, no, 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 no. And, you're not allowed to be here. And finally, she ended up coming into the hospital one day and killed herself at the hospital to make her point. So the imprint or the imagery and whatnot, left an imprint. And now apparently people see this image of this woman walking around.
What year was this that this happened?
It was, and the year escapes me. I can't remember, but it wasn't long ago. It wasn't, a 50-year ago thing. It was within the last, I would say, 30 years. So it wasn't an old occurrence from what I understood from it. So it was interesting. Back
to the TV shows, I think a question that's on everyone's mind is, are the paranormal shows real? Are they staged? Are they do the producers kind of encourage things to be exaggerated? You don't have to necessarily talk about your own shows, but just in general, because sometimes I watch them and I really kind of wonder how much of this is real and how much is fake.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I know the producers that I work with, they really try hard to get accuracy. And I know I'm very much a stickler for sticking to my own opinion. If, anytime I'm doing an interview or anything like that, if I'm, if they're pushing me towards an opinion that I don't agree with, I'm a stickler for that. I'll say, this is my opinion. If you don't like it, don't use it. I've had really good experiences with both haunted hospitals and Paranormal 911, as well as a haunting. A haunting was my personal case, or a personal case for me, and they did a very accurate job in trying to get that right. Now, that being said, there has been so many different shows that I have heard, absolute horror stories about. A good friend of mine, Dr. Barry Taff, he wrote about a few of them in his blog, and he has had a terrible time with some of them. People just, taking what you have, using things without consent, running their own narrative. It can get pretty hairy. I think people watching the shows, especially when it comes to the ones that are more geared toward ghost hunting, they really need to understand that parapsychology isn't conducted that way. Which is frustrating for me because I'm very much an academic in a lot of areas. But it's not parapsychology. A lot of those shows are designed to entertain people. And as long as you watch them with that air, and that set understanding, I think they're fine. Where I start to run into problems with them is when, they're trying to sell some of this stuff as the real thing or real science. And then, people that are, have some insight into this stuff can, immediately start picking out, poor equipment usage or wrong, just stuff that's blatantly not, has been set up or staged. And then parapsychology gets a bad rap for it. So, yeah, I've got mixed feelings about it.
Yeah, and I find too that there's probably a lot of people whose first exposure to the paranormal is through these ghost hunting shows. That's all they know. That's what they assume it is. They want to pursue a career in that. And their first instinct is to get a few friends together, buy some of this equipment, and, go to someone's house who claims they're haunted and they have no experience in it. And they're probably going to end up doing more harm than good, especially when they're dealing with people who are in bad situations in their life, who may have mental illness, and they're going in there, screwing around with stuff that they have no idea what they're doing. I'm just not so sure that's a good idea.
No, and you're completely right. And I think a lot of people don't realize exactly what they're getting into when they pick up this career, because you touched on the subject of things like mental illness and stuff like that, and it's a huge issue. You've got a field where you could have people that are hearing voices because they're actually hearing voices, or they're hearing voices because they have a brain injury, or they need to be on medication, or it's disrupting their life in some way, or they've got something that's untreated. And I think sometimes what will happen is that you can get if you don't have the people around you to assess that or get these people, to a place that can assess that, you're really running a nasty fine line. I mean, I've had cases myself where, one of the people that I've worked with over the years was a registered nurse with 30 years. That's not an accident. We've always got social workers, nurses, people in those fields that are available, where we've gone into a home or something like that. One of the prime questions that I'll ask is, are you on any medication? And we've had a couple of cases where they've come forward and have been on 5 or 6 heavy hitting antipsychotics that all shouldn't be together. And without having a nurse there, I don't know what those medications do. I have no idea. But they were able to turn around and say, you know what, you need to go back to your doctor, call us back when you figured this out. So, I mean, that kind of thing happens. And unless you've got a good beat on some of this stuff, or you're dealing with, for example, a parent that's just lost a child, or, they're dealing with, really heavy grief, or, they've got a marriage that's in shambles because a spouse doesn't believe them or something like that. There's a billion scenarios that kind of get intertwined and piled into this, that I think a lot of these people, when they think they're going ghost hunting, they don't realize the magnitude and the depth of what they're getting into.
And I guess that kind of brings us back to what we were discussing just as we were chatting before the show started here, about having like a healthy skepticism to it. And a lot of the paranormal shows I watch, it almost seems like they're unwilling to even consider the fact that this might not be paranormal. They see something strange in the woods. It's, some legendary creature. There's no way that it's an animal. And I think if you approach it like that, it's just not a healthy way to do it. When you just go into a situation and your first thing is, well, your house is haunted. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. The first thing you have to be able to do is to be able to rule stuff out, and not only rule stuff out, but have the people there that can do it. I've had so many people over the years ask me, can I come on an investigation? Can I come on And honestly, most of the time, probably 90% of the time, I say no. And the reason why is that, number one, it's not a game, and number two, what are you bringing to the table? The people that I bring with me aren't necessarily my buddies. They're people who have a background in architecture or some sort of infrastructure planning, or all sorts of different things. I mean, Stephanie was a architectural technologist. I've worked with engineers, even our audio video people. They've been in broadcast and film and television for decades. All of these people who, I mean, I love them dearly, but man, like these are hardened professionals. They know their job. So, I mean, when you get into a situation like this, I mean, you have to be able to know who your team is, to be able to divvy up what you've got, so that you can make a proper assessment with this stuff. And you have to be able to go in skeptically, but you're not even going, I would even say not even going in skeptically. You're going in to gather data, and you go in with as little bias as you possibly can to gather as much data as you can, and then you make a decision out of the data. Just in the same way that we deal with hauntings when we find out there is one. We go in, we look at the data, what's there, what can we prove, what can we not prove, what are people experiencing, but you don't necessarily, as I say, go in skeptically. You go in to gather data, and then you start forming an opinion.
Yeah, I feel like also it adds a lot of credibility on how concrete your answers are, and how you have a formulated data gathering plan. I like that, rather than if I was to ask you a question and you're like, oh, we just go and see the ghosts. I would be like, okay, yeah.
I mean, you got to take that approach, because people too, when they ask you into their home, and they ask you into their family and into this really intimate part of their life experience. So many people are just discovering this stuff for the first time, and it's terrifying for them. So they're asking you to sort of weigh in on something that is completely sometimes uprooted their whole life. So I mean, I feel like, you know, you got to honor that enough to say, okay, you know, I got to give you the most educated opinion that I can. And it's sometimes it's not going to come from me. It's going to come from, as I say, an architect, or it's going to come from, you know, this is why we've come to the conclusion that we have. But we got to be able to back it up, and it's got to be something more than just, you know, some willy-nilly opinion, especially if they've got something that is completely explainable. Like we had a case in Sherwood Park, and this was, God, probably about 10 years ago, if not more. But we ended up at this home, and this place was a electrician's nightmare. She was the lady that owned the house she had these horrible feelings of being watched. She was seeing stuff out of the corner of her eye, these weird shadows. She was hallucinating. There was a whole pile of things. It was not good. So we started to look around. Long story short, we ended up discovering that she had a transmitter that used to be an intercom system attached to her electrical board. And this wiring system was generating so much electromagnetic fields that it was screwing with her head. And then on top of it, she was on 2 antipsychotics that she shouldn't have been on, that were interacting in a really negative way. She got them from 2 different doctors. And upstairs, because that was just in her downstairs, she had a finished basement. In the upstairs, she had wiring that was so mismatched, and she'd plugged in everything everywhere. That he had what we basically call a fear cage. And a fear cage is when you've surrounded yourself with electromagnetics to the point where, as I say, it's disrupting how your brain is interacting with itself. You know, you're seeing things out of the corner of your eye. You're feeling like you're paranoid. You're being watched. All of these things. So I mean, and on top of that, she had also lost her son. She believed that her son was haunting her house. Her son wasn't haunting her house. She had a horrific electrical problem, and it took us turning around and finding an electrician who could come in and donate his time to start to unravel this disaster. But again, if we had have gone on just based on what she was saying, you would have automatically concluded that this place was, oh yeah, it's haunted.
Yeah. All right, thanks. That's awesome. So I know a lot of things have changed for you in this COVID times. I know you normally hold like workshops and events and stuff like that. How can people, get a hold of you? How can they get involved with your life and your studies?
Well, usually what I'm doing is every Wednesday, I've got a live stream that people can attend for free. It's on, usually it airs on Facebook, and then the classes get put on my website, entityseeker.ca, as well as youtube.com/entityseeker, called Spiritual Healthcare. And Spiritual Healthcare, I started it originally when we all got shut down in quarantine, because people I found were just, they didn't know what the hell to do. And I started to think about how the unknown, regardless of what it is, regardless of whether it's a virus or whether it's an entity or some phenomenon we don't understand, it all comes down to the same emotional tools. And so I started Spiritual Healthcare as a place for people to meet, to show up, to gather, to have some positivity, and to offer them some tools to start to understand how you can create your own reality even amidst uncertainty. And that the unknown doesn't necessarily have to be something to fear, that we really do have control over what we're creating in our world, what we're manifesting. And it doesn't have to do with everything out there. It has to do with what we are, how we're moving forward, how we choose to move forward energetically and physically into the world, and we get to pick that. So it started as, I say, a place to chat about paranormal stuff and whatnot, but it's really grown into a really cool community, educational place. People email in questions. I try to answer as many questions as I can. And it's really neat. Sometimes we go right down the rabbit hole with stuff. So it's really fun. So spiritual healthcare is every Wednesday, usually on Facebook, facebook.com/entityseeker. But entityseeker.ca is my website. You guys can find every possible video. There's my firework and stuff like that that's on there. And you can check that out. My other website, the other meat, is snakeandpire.com. snakeandpire.com. So it is the website that I put the majority of my fire shows to. My partner does a lot of the music for it, and we have a blast. But all my my weird fire performances and fire breathing and that kind of crazy is all there. So.
Well, thanks again. It was great having you on, and I guess we'll be in touch, and we hope to speak to you again soon.
That sounds wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks,
Awesome.
Morgan.
Thanks, guys.
So, Elizabeth, what do you think of that second part of the interview with Morgan?
I think I liked it even more than the first part of the interview. I think that she is just so stunningly intelligent, and also stunningly like open and gifted and talented. And yeah, it's really great to talk to somebody who has a good mix of both. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I thought it was great. Yeah, she's awesome. I can't wait until we can have her on the show again. Now we're going to get on to the scary stories part of our podcast. If you have a paranormal story that happened to you or someone you know, you can send that to us at paranormalphenomena.podcast@gmail.com, and we will possibly read it on the air depending on how many submissions we get. So today we got one from Jin. We both know Jin. He is an actor from Calgary, and he was in Hot Box. Hot Box being a movie that I wrote and directed and Elizabeth starred in. Jin was the older guy at the party that was trying to teach the young dude how to pick up women and was giving him some pretty horrible advice. So Jin's a great guy. He's done a lot of work, and he's a wonderful actor. And he sent us a really cool story that Elizabeth and I read just right before we started today's episode. So we will read that now. Actually, Elizabeth, do you want to read this one, the Ukraine one?
Yeah, sure. 1987, Kiev, Ukraine. In an era following Chernobyl, yes, that Chernobyl, in the city where I was born and raised, we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on the top floor of a 7-story apartment building in the heart of the city. My father used to travel quite a lot as he was part of the National Orchestra, so he was not around that much. I shared the bedroom with my parents. I had my own bed, and my mom was sleeping in my parents' bed. In early fall, sometimes at night, I woke up due to an intense light and heat coming through the window that is near the balcony. My mom is already up looking outside the window. I call for her, but she completely ignores me. She opens the door to the balcony and steps outside. I'm concerned and walk towards her, towards the outside of the balcony, at this point screaming, "Mom! Mom!" There was no sound or wind, just a bright light and intense heat shining right on the building. I'm sure it was not a helicopter. My mom was completely focused, looking at this light, and my mom does not respond to me at all and is starting to walk dangerously close to the edge of the balcony. I finally grab onto her leg, fall to the ground, close my eyes tightly, though I can still see the brightness of the light, and grip tightly to her and try to pull on her. She finally reacted to me. The feeling of the heat completely disappeared. My mom bends down and hugs me and asks what I am doing on the balcony. I open my eyes, of course I am crying, and the light is gone. My mom did not have a recollection of this event whatsoever. Interestingly, I was not the only kid in the building with the same story for the same night. None of the adults recalled this event. Many years later, I have reached out to some of my old friends from Kiev, and through some conversations, we always end up chatting about this very strange experience. Whenever we would bring this up to our parents, none of them remembered a thing. I cannot tell you what we experienced was a UFO, but I can tell you that it was a very unique experience that got seared into my mind and the mind of the other people that experienced this when they were kids.
Cool. What do you think?
I think that's super rad. I don't know. It seems like something out of like a really well-written movie. Like it just seems so well orchestrated, like the actual stories that occurred. Obviously this was just, Jin typing, but yeah, the actual stories that occurred, I'm just like, whoa, like that's nuts. That's insane.
Yeah, I think my favorite part of it was how the kids remembered it, but the adults didn't. That seems like I could see if it was only Jin that this happened to, there could be some doubt to it of what he saw, but the fact that other kids saw it too, but none of the adults saw it. You figured the adults would remember a blinding light in their window in the middle of the night. So that's such an interesting, I wonder what sort of explanation there could be for that.
I know, because at first I was also thinking like, oh, it must be some sort of dream, like he must have been sleepwalking or something and misremembered it because he was A, a child, and B, like sleeping. But the fact that other kids experience the same thing totally negates that. I'm like, well, what could it have been then that, like, I know that, children and adults are often on like different wavelengths, like, spans. And so like there are certain things that like adults are susceptible to, or that children are susceptible to, that the other is not. So I'm kind of like wondering if it's like some sort of illness or like frequency or something that, that only the adults were receiving that the children weren't. I don't know. That's so strange.
So once again, if you have a story of your own that you'd like to submit, you can send it to us at Paranormal Phenomena Podcast at gmail.com. Well, that was a great second episode. It's so cool that we're actually doing this now, and we're finished 2 episodes and we're on to number 3. Hopefully we can keep this going for a long time because I'm having fun and I hope people like watching these. So if you have anything interesting going on at the moment, anything you wanted to talk about to our listeners?
Me? I did just release a video.
Oh yeah, you did.
Yeah, and that was like super fun. It was super fun. I like hired local artists from my hometown to do this video with me, this music video with me. And that was like just like a really cool experience. Like I just kind of always go to big companies and stuff just because they're reliable and have like insanely cool schedules and stuff. But just to be able to like, go with local artists and friends and whatever of my own was really nice. It was also a final project for my school, so it just feels nice to like get that out there, and it had a really good review. So that's,
Where can people watch it?
People can watch it everywhere, on my YouTube, on my Instagram, on my Facebook, and there's a link to it on my Twitter because you can't really post long videos on Twitter. Everywhere, all my social media. Yeah.
If you want to reach out to me, I'm at Brandon Rhiness on Instagram and Twitter, and you can email me at brhiness@gmail.com. And my YouTube channel is Higher Universe. That has all of my short films on there and trailers and things, many of them starring Elizabeth. So if you want to check out our work, be sure to check out my YouTube site. Okay, Elizabeth, thank you for joining me on the second episode, and I guess I'll see you on episode 3.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to the Paranormal Phenomena Podcast. See you next time.